FIFA had spent years operating in a culture where money, favors, and political loyalty were all mixed up.
It's about the soccer, but it's also about more than the soccer.
What promises had been made? What shady payments were made?
World Cups are a great way to understand the world.
It's 9 a.m. on the outskirts of Zurich. A journalist has been given an address and told to show up. He finds a cafe that has agreed to open for just one man. A limo pulls up. A young aide steps out first, then helps a small, elderly man onto the pavement. He walks in. The staff greet him by name. He shakes every hand. His name is Sepp Blatter. For nearly 2 decades, he ran FIFA, the Swiss-based organization that controls the most popular sport on earth, soccer. He oversaw billions of dollars and helped decide which countries got to host the World Cup.
Qatar.
And he survived scandal after scandal. By the time of that morning, he was fighting corruption charges stemming from millions of dollars in bribes and kickbacks. And he wanted to talk.
The FBI had alleged that he was a senior figure in corruption. He was fighting all these corruption allegations. And then he comes out and he sits down with me and he looks me in the eye, and I'm sitting there realizing I'm now to be very careful not to be charmed.
That's Financial Times reporter and author Simon Kuper, the journalist in the cafe. But to understand Blatter and what he built and how it collapsed, you first need to understand the game of soccer itself and how the World Cup came to be. I'm Soni Kassem, and today on 1440 Explorers, we dig into the story of soccer, the FIFA World Cup, and the small group of men who ran the world's game for their own benefit. Soccer is the most popular sport on Earth, period. Its biggest event, the World Cup final, reached nearly 1.5 billion viewers in 2022. That's roughly 11 times more than the Super Bowl in 2026. And yet, if you're listening in the United States, you may have spent very little time thinking about it. Because to some, soccer can seem boring.
People say that the lack of goals in soccer is a weakness sometimes, but in fact, the lack of goals is a strength of soccer, because when there is a goal, it's this moment of incredible excitement and emotion that you don't get in, say, basketball or baseball, where they're scoring all the time.
A simple game that delivers a rare kind of suspense. And every 4 years, that suspense builds toward the biggest event in the biggest sport in the world, the World Cup, which we'll get to in a moment. Versions of the game existed long before there was anything called soccer, or football, as most of the world knows it.
People had always kicked balls, for thousands of years, and so there's records of the Aztecs doing it, the Chinese, these games that existed everywhere.
Variations on soccer existed all over the world, maybe with slightly different rules or ways of scoring, but the basic idea was the same. You have 2 sides, 1 ball, and a fight to get into the other side's space. Then slowly, the game gets standardized.
The real change is when they're codified in England in 1863. So a bunch of upper-class Englishmen get together. They'd all played versions of football at their different public schools, these kind of posh, mostly boarding schools. And they said, let's have the same rules so we can play against each other even after leaving school, because each school would have its own rules. So in 1863, they write the laws of the game. And at the time, Britain is the world's superpower.
And that matters, because once the rules are fixed, the game can travel. Britain had colonies all over the world, so the game and its rules get exported everywhere. The modern version of soccer is simple. 11 players on each side, 1 goal at either end, and with one major exception, the goalkeeper, no hands. And that simplicity turns out to be one of soccer's secret weapons.
But the fact you see a game, you immediately understand it, you reckon you can do it yourself, and then there's not much equipment is required. So you need a ball. That's kind of it. And you can make a ball out of old rags if you don't have any money at all.
That opens up the game to almost everyone.
And so poor people also start playing soccer. It's not like fencing or canoeing. It's not like cricket where you need a grass field that is kept in perfect condition. You can play soccer on any surface.
And once masses of people are playing it in the late 1800s and early 1900s, masses of people start watching it too.
It becomes very popular very quickly. So by, say, 1900, in a lot of cities, especially in Europe and in southern Latin America, you have very big crowds coming to watch games. And then there's money coming in because you can charge the spectators, they pay money. And so then what do you do with that money?
You pay players, you build clubs, you schedule more matches. Basically, the game starts to professionalize. And once the game professionalizes, once there are paying crowds, organized clubs, and national teams playing across borders, someone has to set common rules and organize those international matches, right? That's where the International Federation of Association Football, aka FIFA, comes in.
FIFA is founded in 1904 by men from a few European countries because communications have improved, their railways, soccer is growing, so you want to have a national team that plays against men's national teams from other countries.
National federations popped up in most countries. They organize the sport inside their borders. What FIFA does is it sits right above these federations. It brings those federations into one international structure, setting rules for competition between them, and gradually becoming the body that governs world soccer. You might be wondering, wait, why would these national federations agree to give up power? Well, because on their own, they can't run international soccer at all. If every country sets its own rules, its own schedules, its own standards, there is no global game. It's just sort of anarchy.
Anarchy! I don't even know what that means, but I love it!
Okay, to understand what happens next, you need one more piece of context. In the early 1900s, international soccer mostly lived at the Olympics. That was where national teams met, and where the game presented itself to the world. But there's a problem. The Olympics are for amateurs, meaning players aren't supposed to be paid. Yet, as we've seen, soccer is changing. Clubs are growing, crowds are exploding, and the best players are now professionals. So the biggest international stage in the sport has a basic flaw. It can't fully accommodate the sport as it actually exists. The game's top global competition is still built around amateurs. And so FIFA starts thinking, if soccer is going to become a truly global sport, it needs its own tournament. One that belongs just to soccer, not one that shares the stage with track and field and hammer throwing.
And very soon they say, we should have a World Cup. We should have a kind of tournament where the best teams in the world play against each other, a world championship.
That idea becomes reality in 1930, when FIFA stages the first World Cup in Uruguay. It's all very early days. It's small and almost experimental. Of the 4 European teams competing, 3 come over on the same ship, and they all train on the ship's deck.
It's like a holiday outing. It's incredibly exciting.
And that excitement fills the home country. Uruguay stadiums are packed.
And at the end, it's decided, you know what? This World Cup experiment, it kind of works. We like it. Let's do it again.
And they do. What follows is a series of escalating successes. Newspapers start writing about it. Radio starts to broadcast games. And because the rules are easy to grasp and the drama is easy to feel, the World Cup quickly gives soccer a global reach. Even if in the United States, it never quite catches on the same way, overshadowed by baseball and later American football. Then, in the 1950s, comes the next great accelerant, TV.
With television, it reaches these new territories and it starts to become really the global game, not just the Euro-Latin American game.
And television doesn't just make the World Cup more visible, it makes it more valuable. With the tournament now broadcast into millions of homes, the audience explodes, and the money follows. By the 1960s, the World Cup was starting to look like the World Cup of today. Every 4 years, the whole world tries to qualify. Of these teams, around 16 make it to the knockout phase. Lose once, then you're out. 7 games to win it all. One country lifts the trophy, and for 4 years, calls itself the best in the world. And the scale is massive. By the modern era, the final match alone draws over 1 billion viewers. Entire countries stop to watch. It's not just a tournament. this is one of the largest shared events on the planet. By the 1970s and 80s, under FIFA's longtime president Joao Havelange and his Swiss number 2, Sepp Blatter, the World Cup is no longer just a championship. It's a stage where politics, national identity, and power all play out. And nowhere is this more on display than in the 1986 World Cup, specifically the quarterfinal match between Argentina and England.
Well over 100,000 here to witness it.
So 4 years before, in 1982, Britain and Argentina had fought the Falklands War over the possession of a few islands off the coast of Argentina.
Britain won, and some 650 Argentinian soldiers were killed. So when Argentinian legend Diego Maradona takes the field against England, this is not just a game. It's loaded with revenge and national pride.
Maradona scores 2 legendary goals. One with his hand, he cheats.
Back over the top,
And then soon after that hand goal, he scores a goal where he dribbles through the whole England team. Just one of the best goals in the history of soccer.
It's Diego Maradona, and it is quite magnificent.
Why it's so famous is because it's about more than soccer. It's about politics and national pride and nationalism off the field. It's about the soccer, but it's also about more than the soccer. World Cups are a great way to understand the world.
And as the World Cup grows, FIFA's power grows with it. Because FIFA doesn't just run the tournament, it also controls one of the most coveted decisions in global sports: who gets to host it. Countries would spend years building their case. Stadium plans, transit plans, new hotels, security. They would lobby super hard and make huge promises. But the final choice was not made by the full FIFA membership, meaning the 211 member associations. This is basically how the Olympics operate. You have hundreds of member associations that all vote. No, this decision used to be made by a small executive committee, just a few dozen men, voting behind closed doors. And this is where the scale of the World Cup starts to collide with the FIFA that is still really small and insular. Because while this is now the biggest event in the biggest sport in the world, some of the most important decisions still sit in the hands of a tiny circle of officials. Investigators would later say it was a setup that invited abuse. In 2015, the US Department of Justice accused FIFA officials of running a sprawling bribery scheme involving more than $150 million. And looming over all of it was FIFA president Sepp Blatter. He had run FIFA for 17 years and was not charged in the main US case, but he led the institution at the center of it. He had mastered its politics and outlasted almost everyone around him. Now that whole world was starting to collapse.
I'm told to go to this cafe kind of inn at the edge of Zurich. So I go out to the edge and it's becoming farmland, there's hills.
It's 9 a.m. on the outskirts of Zurich, Switzerland. Simon Kuper has been given a street number where he's supposed to meet Sepp Blatter, the longtime FIFA president, and for years, one of the most powerful men in world soccer. After some searching, he finds the cafe.
Cafe is closed. And then this limousine stops outside and this young man gets out and he helps this tiny older man out of the limousine. The FBI had alleged that he was a senior figure in corruption. He was fighting all these corruption allegations. And then he comes out and he sits down with me and he looks me in the eye. And a lot of powerful, important people you interview, they don't really care who you are. They're not interested in the people around them. And he looks at me and he thinks, who is this guy? How do I charm him? And I'm sitting there realizing I'm now to be very careful not to be charmed.
If you want to understand how FIFA worked at the height of its power, Blatter is your guy. He didn't just witness that world, he grew up inside it. For nearly 2 decades, he sat at the top of FIFA. If corruption became part of the institution, it happened on his watch.
And so I sit down with him for a couple of hours. He gives me the story of his life in football and how he rose to the top of soccer.
Blatter joined FIFA in 1975. He was in his 30s. The FIFA president at the time was Joao Havelange, the Brazilian who had taken over in the 1970s. And FIFA still looked small. Its Zurich headquarters had just 12 staff members. Blatter rose fast inside that world. He started as technical director. In 1981, he became general secretary, which is basically the top administrator in the building. Then, in 1998, he took over from Havelange and became FIFA president himself. Okay, what does the president of FIFA really preside over? First, the most valuable thing FIFA owns.
The biggest property maybe in all of sports is the Men's World Cup. And the Men's World Cup brings in several billion every 4 years.
And that money comes from television rights, sponsorship and marketing deals, licensing, hospitality, and ticket sales. In FIFA's own finances, the World Cup is the engine. For the 2019 to 2022 cycle, FIFA brought in $7.6 billion, mostly tied to the tournament. In theory, that money is supposed to go back into the sport, to its 211 member associations, to training centers, fields, equipment, travel, and youth programs. As we'll see, that's not always what happened. The president's other huge job is helping decide where the World Cup goes next. Countries bid and make their case, then FIFA chooses. And that prize is so prestigious that governments line up for it, even though economists have spent years warning that hosting often doesn't pay off and can even hurt tourism. So to recap, the FIFA president oversees the bidding process for who gets to host, sells the television and commercial rights, and decides how the money moves. Back in that cafe outside Zurich, Simon is sitting across from Sepp Blatter, taking it all in as he recounts his life and the ins and outs of his rise to the presidency. Blatter leans in as he talks, holding eye contact, gesturing with his hands, drawing Simon in with the ease of someone who has spent decades winning people over. There's a warmth to it, a sense that you've been brought into his circle, but Simon knows that's not really why he's there. And at a certain point, the conversation has to move away from the polished life story and toward the harder chapter, when that system came under real pressure, when scrutiny intensified, and when things inside FIFA began to come apart. So Simon pivots to that period and starts walking us through what they talked about.
If you're a president of a small federation, say on a Caribbean island, and there's maybe 500 people in your country that play soccer, organized soccer, which is not unusual. You know, there's a lot of small countries in the world. And then FIFA typically gives each federation the same amounts of money. So whether you're Germany, China, or Ireland in the Caribbean Sea, you get, say, $20 million from the FIFA World Cup rights. If you're the president of a small island football federation, you get $20 million from FIFA. Well, you don't have to necessarily tell anyone. You put it in your pocket. You get it paid into a bank account, offshore bank account. So a lot of that money disappears.
Simon says it's not just the small countries. What Blatter understood is that power inside FIFA didn't come from the biggest countries. It came from the votes, and there were a lot of them. Dozens of smaller federations, each with the same vote as Germany or Brazil, many of them reliant on FIFA money to run. And so, over time, FIFA and Blatter built a system where World Cup money flowed out in the name of development, with so little oversight that it was ripe for abuse. But we should mention, the striking thing about Blatter is that he didn't seem driven, first of all, by the fantasy of becoming super rich. The reporting on him points instead to something more political. A man obsessed with holding the presidency, with staying at the center of the game, with being the one person world soccer ran through. Simon Kuper says there was never much of a real enforcement system here. No serious mechanism checking where the money was going. No real appetite to look too closely.
FIFA doesn't really have that. FIFA doesn't want its most senior, most powerful people to be sent to jail. I mean, FIFA exists to serve those people. There's very little control on FIFA. It's just a few guys in a cash box in Switzerland. Switzerland historically has left them alone to do what they want.
And under Blatter, that weak oversight didn't just create opportunities for abuse. It created leverage.
They vote for you as FIFA president. And also, if one of them turns against you, makes trouble for you, you say, oh, well, I have some evidence that you've been stealing money. And then you produce that evidence and the guy is disciplined and he disappears.
That is where the fault lies. Not that Blatter personally pocketed every dollar that went missing in some federation far from Zurich. There isn't a clear public finding that he knowingly approved of every theft. The problem is that he ran a patronage system. FIFA money went out, political support came back, and the lack of oversight meant officials could misuse funds while the president got their loyalty. That feedback loop is what made the whole structure so rotten. By this point, the problem inside FIFA wasn't just money flowing out with too little oversight. The real problem was that the World Cup was now one of the most valuable events in the world. Countries wanted the prestige. the contracts, and influence that came with hosting it. And for years, the decision of who hosted rested not with all of FIFA's members, but with a small executive committee. That's important, because by now, FIFA had spent years operating in a culture where money, favors, and political loyalty were all mixed up. So when countries competed for the World Cup, they entered a system that was already vulnerable. By 2010, the stakes were unusually high. FIFA was choosing 2 hosts at once.
2018 and the 2022 FIFA World Cup host announcement.
The United States wanted 2022 badly. It put in a serious, well-funded bid that carried the weight of the world's most powerful country. And when Simon Kuper looks back on Sepp Blatter's presidency, this is the moment he returns to.
I think the big thing he regretted is kind of the biggest moment of his tenure. It's December 2nd, 2010, in Zurich.
Blatter is on stage. The cameras are on. He's about to announce the hosts of the next 2 World Cups. It's a big, splashy, slightly tacky event. But for soccer, this is the Oscars. No one knows what's inside the envelope until it's opened. So he takes one envelope and...
Ladies and gentlemen, will be organized in Russia.
And even that is unsettling. Russia is already a controversial choice, fresh off the 2008 war with Georgia, and increasingly seen in the West as an authoritarian state using big global events to polish its image. But that's not the real shock. Plenty of people already suspected 2018 might go to Russia. And then Blatter opens the second envelope for 2022.
Is Qatar.
So when he pulls the name Qatar out of the envelope, and he holds it up, and he says, Qatar, he is not smiling, which you're supposed to smile. Obviously, you're unveiling the host of the World Cup. But he's thinking, oh my 22 guys have chosen Russia and Qatar.
That reaction is telling, because Blatter had, yes, helped build the system, but he actually didn't fully control every person inside it. And now the executive committee had made 2 decisions that were going to bring enormous scrutiny. Russia was controversial for many reasons, but Qatar was explosive.
It's a tiny Gulf state, 300,000 Qataris. It's way too hot to host a Summer World Cup. Temperatures well above 110 degrees in summer. And there's no soccer culture. Games there might attract 300 spectators.
And for the United States to lose that vote to Qatar made the result much harder to brush off. This was not just surprising. It looked suspicious, almost at once. Even before the vote, 2 FIFA executive committee members had been suspended over allegations that they were willing to sell their votes. Later, US prosecutors would allege that bribes were paid in connection with Qatar's bid. At the cafe, Simon puts it to Blatter directly. Some executive committee members took money to vote for Qatar, right? But Blatter stays firm. I don't know that, he says. I don't know. People said they have given money. But in the know or not in the know, Blatter is no fool. Standing there on stage, he has to sense that this is the moment. The scrutiny is about to become impossible to contain.
The Western countries are going to be very angry, and the US is going to seek retribution. And the US was quite right to seek retribution because bribes were paid. But I think if the US had won, the FBI would not have been pushed to investigate the bribery within FIFA.
For years, FIFA's internal culture had been tolerated, but this vote forced the system into the open. The same closed structure that let money move quietly through FIFA had now touched the most visible decision the organization could make. And once Russia and Qatar won, the scrutiny intensified. Investigators, journalists, and prosecutors started pushing harder. The questions became sharper. Who had voted for whom exactly? What promises had been made? What shady payments were made? As Simon sits across from him, taking it down nearly word for word, Blatter says, quote, "If the US had had the World Cup, then the whole organization of FIFA would not have been in such a critical situation. The Americans, bad losers, attacked FIFA." Blatter wasn't charged in the main US bribery case and was later acquitted in Swiss court. But this was still the beginning of the end for him. The system he had spent years mastering was now impossible to contain. Sponsors start to pull back. FIFA's leadership is unraveling, and the legitimacy of the World Cup itself is now in question. Days after being re-elected president, Blatter announces, he will step down. After nearly 20 years at the top, the system that kept him in power is the same system that brings him down. Back outside the cafe, the morning has settled into something quieter. Blatter's driver was waiting by the car. His press staffer also nearby. Inside, the cafe staff, who opened early for Blatter, were still moving about. Each one had been greeted earlier, with a handshake as Blatter walked in. A small procession of recognition, of familiarity, of a man who for a long time was used to being at the center of things. Toward the end of their conversation, Simon asks Blatter one more question. How does he want to be remembered? By this point, Blatter is tired, Simon tells me, so he switches to German, and he says one word: correct, meaning proper or accurate. If the judgment of him was truly correct, he tells Simon, then quote, "You should say he's the man who brought international football into the world. 2 billion followers." In Blatter's telling, soccer's global rise, this massive shared thing, wasn't driven by television or history or the millions of people who played it. It was him. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment down below. And until next time, keep exploring.